I lost 3 pregnancies due to health challenges. With the 4th one, the doctor told me he has to do tube ligation for me, thus tightening my womb to prevent this pregnancy from failing like the previous 3. The doctor asked me not to do any chores in the house, including lifting items, so my husband was doing everything in the house. My husband started going to work late due to the workload, which got me worried. I asked my husband one day to allow my mother to spend some time with us so she could extend a helping hand to relieve him of the workload in the house. He didn't agree, suggesting his sister should rather come instead of my mother. I told him I wouldn't be able to connect with his sister well in my situation, so he should agree to my mother coming instead of his sister, which he agreed to. My mother came, and everything was going very well. When my mother is going to the market, she goes with my husband. My mother does almost everything with my husband. I live a 2-story building, and I stay on the top floor while my mom stays on the ground floor. Everything, including the kitchen, is on the ground floor, where my mom cooks. Sometimes I come to the ground floor for my mom to take care of me, and if I am not able to come down, my mom will climb to the top floor to feed me. One day, I was in the hall when I realized my mother was speaking to someone, so I asked her who she was talking to. She told me she was speaking to my uncle, and he wanted to talk to me as well. My uncle inquires about my health and how things are going in the house. I told my uncle everything was running smoothly. After the call ended, I realized my mom had gotten a message on her phone. I thought my mom had gotten a boyfriend for him to be texting her. And if so, why hasn't my mother informed me? Out of curiosity, I opened the message to read the import of the message. The message reads, "I can't wait to have you tonight." I was surprised to see that message, so I made a search to know who sent it to my mother. What I saw shocked me and made me want to pee all at once. The shocking news was that the number that sent that kind of message was my husband's number. The pastor asked me if I was sure about the number that sent the message, "I can't wait to have you tonight," being my husband's phone number. I responded positively because I know my husband's phone number. I got shocked that evening, which made me sleep early that day. My husband is someone who usually prays from 12 to 1 every midnight. The pastor asked if I asked my husband about what I saw when he returned. I told him I didn't ask because I wanted to witness what would happen that night with my own eyes. The pastor asked if I checked from the messages on the phone on how my husband has been chatting with my mom and for how long. The messages on the phone were all about love, and that has been happening for a long time, and I was so surprised that my husband and my mom are engaging in that act. Seeing my husband's phone number and receiving those messages made me very tired throughout the day, so I went to bed early. I didn't want to ask him anything. When my husband woke up around midnight to go and pray as usual, he thought I was asleep, but I was monitoring his movements. When he stepped out, I quietly followed him and realized he had entered my mom's room on the ground floor. I followed her to the door. What I heard in the room between my mom and my husband in a love conversation made me urinate on myself. What shocked me most was that I heard my husband sleeping with my mom. And how I got to know was that the love language my husband says to me when we are making love was exactly the same thing he was saying to my mom. I was shocked and sat down immediately at the door and waited for them to complete what they were doing in the room. When my husband got out of the room and I saw him, I shouted, "Darling," and my husband shouted back, "Jesus." My mother then got out of the room to see what was happening. I held my mom's cloth at her chest when I saw her, but she broke out of it, entered her room, and locked it. I started crying and banging at my mom's door, asking her if she wanted to break my marriage. The pastor asked me what my mom said when she saw me at the gate. I told the pastor that my mom asked my husband if I was following him when he was coming to her room. I started shedding tears. I couldn't believe my ears that day, and I cried my heart out. My husband stepped out that night and never returned until 3 days before he came back. He never slept in the house, and he wasn't picking up my calls either. I called my uncle to come over to the house, though I didn't reveal to him what was happening. When he came, he coincidentally met my husband, who had been away for 3 days. I told my uncle to ask my husband and my mother what was going on in the house. No one said anything. All that my husband was doing was kneeling down before me, begging and crying. He was crying and begging. I told my husband I would only accept his apology if he would let my mother move out of the house. My uncle asked my mother to leave the house. My mother then told my uncle to take the lead, and she would follow it up. I immediately slapped my husband and asked him to drive my mother away from the house. And if he doesn't do that, I will leave the house for them. The pastor asked if my uncle had asked my mother if she had slept with my husband. I told the pastor that my mom never spoke, nor did my husband. All that my husband was doing was begging and crying before me kneeling down. I was hurt that my own mother had an affair with my husband. The pastor asked if the woman was my biological mother. Indeed, she is my biological mother. Since my mother didn't want to leave the house, I packed my stuff and left the house to stay with my friend and my 8-month-old pregnancy. Throughout my stay at my friend's place, my husband never called me, answered, or returned my calls. I gave birth at my friend's place, and after 3 months, I decided to go back to my husband's house and iron out the problems. When I returned to the house, I saw another shock in my life. Pastor, you would be surprised at what I saw. My mom's head was resting on the lap of my husband. I screamed on top of my voice and asked my mother, "What kind of abomination are you doing, mother?" None of them said anything. And that's not all I saw, Pastor. My mother was heavily pregnant with my husband. I knew my mother, she was pregnant. My husband asked me what I was doing in the house. He then pushed me out of the house. I wept like a baby and was shocked to my bones. I banged on the door repeatedly, but no one opened it. I was still carrying my 3-month-old baby. People were asking me questions, but I never answered them. What I heard people saying was that, as my husband has said, the child doesn't belong to him, which is why he has driven me out of the house. I picked up a car from there and rushed to my uncle's place. My uncle asked me not to tell anyone. He was down with a stroke, and he asked me to wait till he recovered so he could go with me to resolve the issues. I have never been able to tell anyone. Even the friend I went to stay with doesn't know. What she knows is that my husband has sacked me from the house because of a woman. She doesn't know it is my mother. It is difficult for me to tell anyone. So I left my uncle's place to see my mother's pastor and reported to him that my husband has sacked me from the house. My intention was that he would go with me and beg on my behalf so they could forgive me for all the wrongs I have done. When we went there, my mother was standing on the top floor, laughing at us, while the pastor and I were standing behind the gate. We knocked at the gate continuously, but no one answered. My mom was just laughing at us. He didn't even consider the pastor. I have been trying to tell the family of my husband, but no one cares. My husband is the richest in the family, so whatever he says is final. The sad thing is that I haven't been able to tell my husband's family that my mother has gotten pregnant for my husband. Even my sister-in-law was blaming me for leaving my husband to stay with another man while I was pregnant. I told her it wasn't true. She never listens, even when I try to explain certain things to my husband's sister. My husband is the only one providing for his family, so they believe whatever he tells them since he is the breadwinner. I am in my 8th month now, and I haven't heard from both my mother and husband. Recently, I was going through my husband's WhatsApp status, and I saw he had posted a child who looked like my child and my husband. So I believe my mom has given birth. My uncle is now dead, and my mom never came to the funeral. I am 27 years old, and my mom is 47 years old. My mother has never revealed to me who my real father is. I have been asking her all this while, but she has given me no answer. This is a true life story that happened in Africa. Please subscribe, comment, share, and like for more real life stories.